Tennessee Life is sponsored by
Mid-South Sewing and Fabric has what you need for your creative adventure. If it's sewing, embroidery, or vinyl projects you need for a home business, Etsy, Pinterest, and your family, we have it. Mid-South Sewing sells Brothers Sewing and Embroidery machines and the latest scan and cut crafting machine. Mid-South Sewing and Fabric in the Gallery Shopping Center.
Tennessee Life is also brought to you by The Flower Pot. For over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations. KnoxvilleFlowerPot.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Coming up on this edition of Tennessee Life, from salsas to fruit preserves, home canning is making a comeback. When your friends raid your pantry of homemade jam, then maybe it's time to go into business, like this Knoxville woman.
People have a soft spot for home canned goods. They really do. I think it evokes the memory for a lot of people of being at home and either their mother or their grandmother or some other family member, you know, a generation, 2 generations, 3 generations back, doing it for the original purpose, the preserving of the food.
With fields of orchards full of produce, the Fruit and Berry Patch keeps the goodness going year-round with their homemade apple butter, cooked and canned right on the farm.
In the past, it used to be a sort of a family get-together. They would cook it in a copper kettle over a hot fire, and you had to stir it constantly or it would scorch. Today we've moved to slow cookers, ovens, steam kettles. That is a little slower, but you don't have to stand right over it all the time.
This volunteer state couple started canning their home garden harvest for friends, then took it to the farmers market, which then grew into the Nashville Jam Company.
We had a large garden, and every night when I would be getting eaten alive by mosquitoes picking the heirloom cherry tomatoes, you know, there was just so many of them. I hated to see them go to waste. We just started selling them at the farmers markets, and we started making a couple different flavors of jams and jellies in mason jars with black and white labels that we printed off our home computer.
Those stories next on Tennessee Life.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Tennessee Life. I'm Vicki Lawson. Just something about home canned goods that takes us back to the kitchens of our mothers and grandmothers. What our relatives did out of necessity is getting new attention today as people crave healthier, homemade foods. Heather Howell has canned her whole life. She met us in her Knoxville kitchen and talked about the inspiration behind the Simply Happy Canning Company.
People have a soft spot for home canned goods. They really do. I think it evokes the memory for a lot of people of being at home and either their mother or their grandmother or some other family member, you know, a generation, 2 generations, 3 generations back. Some of my earliest memories are standing on a stool in front of the stove and stirring things like apple butter or fruit and berry mixtures while my mom got the jars ready. My grandmother canned, my mother canned, my aunts canned, my family cans. It's a way of preserving the extra that you have from the garden or from the orchard. I'm Heather Howell. I'm the owner of Simply Happy Canning Company. We handcraft gourmet jams and jellies from local produce. I really enjoy being able to buy from the local farmers markets. I'm buying locally. I'm making jam and jelly locally, and then I'm selling the jam and jelly locally. I look at it as a very beneficial thing. When I produce a product, it actually ends up being local twice. I think it's a really wonderful thing to be able to turn over like that within the community. I've kind of always canned, and over the holidays I tend to throw parties, and people would raid my pantry, and I would never get my jars back. And the only way to get my jars back would be to say, hey, if you want more, bring me my jars back. It was a natural progression to just start making it and selling it because so many people were asking me for it. The only way to make more and keep everybody happy was to go into business. You can find my Simply Happy canning products at Iams Gift Shop. The Tennessee Historical Society has been carrying it. I'd like to see Simply Happy Canning get into its own building, of course, and start to be carried at some of the other local smaller markets around. It's a means to an end to preserve, excess produce. It's also different depending on where you're at. I'm a transplanted northerner, and canning in the north is different than canning in the south. You're canning different things. You may be using a lot of different spices, and it may be the end product that you use it for may be different. I was born in Kodiak, Alaska, and up there, when you get produce or fresh produce, there's a very short season. It's 3 months, so you save and can just as much as you can. Luckily, here in Tennessee, the growing season's a lot longer. The quality here in Tennessee is much better. It's great. Some of the ones that are our best sellers are the hot love apple, which is tomato jam. Tomatoes used to be called love apples. We have an orange creamsicle. It's very reminiscent of going out to the ice cream truck and those orange push-ups that you would get. There are some odd ones. Kudzu blossom jelly is unique. If you're not from around here, you may even say, what is kudzu? The tomato jam is a unique kind of thing because you're taking what's typically thought of as a vegetable and turning it into a jelly. Getting the ingredients together to turn out something that it's a familiar flavor, but not your grandma's jam and jelly. We're getting ready to start cooking stuff here in a minute. Today we are going to be making a garden salsa, and then we're also going to be making a bruschetta. The reason for both of them is that it's the same basic ingredients between the two. You have a lot of tomatoes, some spices, some seasoning, some vinegar, those kind of things. A lot of times you don't want to make 20 pints of the same product, so we're going to mix it up a little bit and do 2 different products.
But I'm going to do this.
Wonderful. Depending on what you're canning, depending on how much you're canning, will determine the amount of time that you spend doing it. Sometimes it's just a couple hours, sometimes it's an all-day, 2-day event. 30, 40 pounds of tomatoes is going to take a little longer than 5 pounds of strawberries. Prep is the majority of your work, prepping the fruits and vegetables so that they are in the good form to go ahead and start working with. Chopping tomatoes, dicing peppers and onions, getting everything ready to go into the pot and then into the can. I love teaching people how to can. More often than not, someone will come to me with a basket of peppers or a bushel of peaches and say, hey, can you show me what to do with this? And I am more than happy to kind of explain to someone the process of going through canning and to can with them. Because it is important to go by standardized and safe recipes. That's something that I may see every once in a while, and I'm always enthused when people go to a canning college or use a good resource, because there are some things that can be kind of dangerous. You want to make sure that you're sterilizing jars, processing things properly, and you want people to know those things. After you pull them out of the water bath, let them sit for about 5 minutes, you'll start to hear little pings. The worst mistake that I made as far as for canning stuff, and it was when I was first starting to learn to make kudzu blossom jelly, not knowing that kudzu blossoms are very, very buggy. Very, very buggy, and you actually have to really wash. It's hard to wash a flower. It really is. So the first time I made kudzu blossom jelly, I didn't realize that the bugs were just so small, and I had this beautiful pinky lavender jelly when I was done, and I looked at it, and lo and behold, there are little bugs all inside it. Needless to say, we didn't sell that. That didn't go to anybody. That's, But that's probably the worst mistake that I made as far as for canning. I try to be on top of it. Then we're going to do about 1/4 cup of garlic. So I get a lot of my recipes either online from the National Center for Home Food Preservation, which is kind of the be-all and end-all of this is a standardized recipe. The Tennessee Department of Agriculture has a canning college, and they've got some great information available online as well. And then there's, of course, the Canning Bible, the Ball Canning Book, which their recipes are wonderful. There is an incredible sense of accomplishment when you see something like a huge box or basket of tomatoes that you have picked up, and then not suddenly, but a few hours later, you've got 20 beautiful jars of preserved tomatoes. Or knowing that you don't want to let food go to waste. I see a lot of wasted food, things spoil. You don't want them to spoil, so go ahead and make something out of it that you can keep and that's worth having. People are kind of going back towards wanting to know what's in their food. When you buy things off the shelf, you may have to completely read the back label and you still don't know some of the things that you're reading. Whereas when you can something in your own home, by yourself, with a friend, you're watching, you're putting the ingredients in there yourself. So you know, okay, this is what's in there. It can be an intimidating process. You're working with hot jars and pouring hot jam, and you've got things going all over your kitchen, but it is also a lot of fun. When you finish and you've got gifts or a pantry full of canned products, it's a real sense of accomplishment. Cheers.
Later on Tennessee Life, how one couple took their extra garden produce and turned it into the Nashville Jam Company.
And then also, I believe Tennessee grows fantastic local produce, and when it's in season, you can't beat it.
But next, we go inside a farm kitchen where fresh apples go from the field into the jar. This fresh apple butter just tastes like fall.
From the fruit to the cinnamon and spices, apple butter puts the essence of fall in a jar. The Fruit and Berry Patch in Halls makes theirs using local apples from East Tennessee. Dennis Fox and his family have been running the farm since 1982. He explained what makes a great apple butter recipe.
We started the Fruit and Berry Patch in the winter of 1982. We had our first crop of strawberries in the spring of 1984, and we've been adding crops ever since. We have a big selection of pumpkins. We've got all sizes, shapes, colors. We have 14 or 15 varieties of apples. We've already always sold everything we could raise, and then some. I've always wanted to farm, but when I graduated from college in horticulture, I realized it took a small fortune to get started in farming, so I had to do something else for a few years. I was a professor of food science at the University of Kentucky, and then after we started to farm, I taught for 10 more years at UT. When I was in about the 5th grade, I was plowing gardens to put out a big garden. I wasn't skilled enough to handle the old mule, so my mother would lead the mule and I would do the plowing. It's just something I've enjoyed doing, just being out in the field. There's nothing more comforting than riding a tractor, being by yourself, and you can thank the good Lord for what you've got, or you can daydream or whatever you want to do. My work has brought this about, and it was work. We took out 5,000 feet of cross fencing before we ever started. That's a lot of fence. We make apple butter here at the Fruit and Berry Patch, and personally I think it's pretty doggone good apple butter. It takes about 4 days. 3 of them cooking it down, and another day putting the sugar and spices in it and canning it. And we can do about 120 gallons of applesauce a day, so it goes through pretty fast. In the past, it used to be a sort of a family get-together. They would cook it in a copper kettle over a hot fire, and you had to stir it constantly or it would scorch. Today we've moved to slow cookers, ovens, steam kettles. That is a little slower, but you don't have to stand right over it all the time. There's 2 things that make good apple butter. One is the varieties of apples that you use, and the other is the spices. The spices can be very individualized. Some people don't like cinnamon. Some people don't like nutmeg. So you can individualize the spices to suit yourself. We have a set recipe and we follow it. It's one I passed on several years ago. And the fact is, I came up with the recipe. We're right on the borderline of growing apples. Apples like cool weather. And it's a little hot down here in the valley, but we grow quite a few different varieties of apples. Some that you can't buy anywhere else, for instance, the transparent apple or Lodi. The old timers around here just love that apple. It comes in June. It's got a real thin skin. It'll last about 2 weeks, but makes one heck of a fried apple. But we bring in most of our apples from Hendersonville, North Carolina. That's up on top of the mountain. It's a lot cooler. I like the Golden Delicious in applesauce and apple butter for a particular reason. It has a distinctive odor or bouquet, and I love it in there for that reason. I like to have it in my apple cider for that reason. So this makes good apple butter, applesauce. It's a good eating apple. The worst thing about it is it doesn't have much wax on it, so it will shrivel in storage. It's real bad to shrivel up. This apple here is my favorite apple, a Mutsu. It's green now, but it looks like a Granny Smith. It don't taste like a Granny Smith, and it will turn yellow later in the season. Its mama was this little apple here, and the big problem with this apple is sometimes it gets so big it's difficult to eat. We have had 2-pound Mutsu apples in our orchard. This apple here is to the south what the McIntosh is to the north. My mother thought that was the only variety of apples that existed. It's a red wine sap. It makes excellent apple butter, makes excellent apple sauce. It does tend to cook up. I didn't know that apple pie was supposed to have pieces of apple in it until I was grown, but this was the apple that she used. The wine sap, Mutsu, Golden Delicious, Rome, Cortland, all of those I recommend, and I recommend blends of those apples if you can. Sometimes you don't have a choice. They'll make good apple butter by themselves, but I like the blend, especially when you've got the golden in it. I like to be creative. Now, I'm not an artist, but if I can make something that tastes good, and I'm the official taster here for homemade applesauce, it's darn good. Everything we do, I pass on. It makes me feel good when customers come in and say, I like what you made. You get a lot of satisfaction out of that.
One volunteer state couple started canning when they had more fruit from their garden than they could eat. They gave some away and made jam with the rest. Those jams were such a hit with friends and farmers markets, the Nashville Jam Company was born.
My name is Courtney Barron, and my husband and I own the Nashville Jam Company. We make jams and jellies, sauces, and distribute them locally in different states, from Texas to New York. We started as just a hobby for something for my husband and I to do on the weekends together.
The housing market collapsed in early 2008. We started by growing heirloom tomatoes and turning those tomatoes into salsa.
We had a large garden, and every night when I would be getting eaten alive by mosquitoes picking the heirloom cherry tomatoes, there was just so many of them. I hated to see them go to waste. We just started selling them at the farmers markets, and we started making a couple different flavors of jams and jellies in mason jars with black and white labels that we printed off our home computer.
Salsa evolved into jam, and the jam really took off, so here we are today.
It's a crazy story. I mean, just going from mason jars literally to adding flavors and, you know, choosing a different jar. And it really just kind of snowballed from there. We actually started at the Murfreesboro Saturday Square Market. It's on the square.
And we got to know those people, and maybe it was peaches, or maybe it was strawberries, or blueberries, or blackberries, whatever it was. We got to know those farmers intimately because we were selling right alongside them. So it was pretty neat to have that happen and then form that bond from the birth of the company.
It's actually my 7th year at the Murfreesboro Market this year, and we have grown exponentially in the past 7 years. So our first goal is to get into Whole Foods. They were one of our first stores that we got into. It's so funny because I actually read the book Cold Calling for Idiots because I was very nervous going into stores and trying to pitch the idea of them having the jam on the store shelf. For a lot of the major hotels in Nashville and restaurants, as well as a pretty large regional chain, we do a lot of service size containers. So to where, you know, just we got some notoriety and people just started calling us.
So there's a lot that goes into making jam and jelly, especially on the volume that we do now. We cook in 100-gallon kettles and 40-gallon kettles. We use several local farms. The Green Door Gourmet or Hidden Valley Farm in West Nashville is one of them. Guardian Herb Farms is a new one that we're looking at using this year for blueberries and blackberries. And then there's also Cox Berry Farm in McMinnville. So we get all of the fruit, we bring it all together, we put it in kettles, we add a little bit of sugar, a little bit of real lemon juice, heat it to 190 degrees, put it in jars, let it cool, put labels on it, and then send it out to stores.
You know, our farthest stores are actually just people that have actually contacted us. They've been in Nashville, tried our jam at a farmer's market or restaurant and loved it, and called and wanted to put it in their boutique or store or restaurant. For a list of retailers, you could visit the NashvilleJamsCo.com, and the jam is plural. Also, we do a couple farmers markets throughout the week in Nashville. We are set up at Sevier Park at the 12 South Farmers Market on Tuesday nights from 3:30 to 6:30. We also set up at the Hip Donaldson Farmers Market, which is on Friday evenings from 4 to 7 in the Ace Hardware parking lot right next to Bank of America on Lebanon Road. And then, like I said before, the Murfreesboro Market on Saturday mornings, 8 till noon. Starts the first Saturday in June, goes to the last Saturday in October. And we actually have our own restaurant. It's called the Nashville Jam Cafe. We opened Mother's Day weekend 2 years ago, so I guess, what is that, like a little over a year and a half? And it is located at 5234 Saundersville Road in Old Hickory, Wednesday through Sunday from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m.
We built a relationship with farmers early on in our infancy, really, because we started out really, really small on our home kitchen stove, sourcing stuff from farmers markets, and then we were returning to those farmers markets to sell our goods. So we were right next to farmers all the time. The great thing about getting stuff locally is you know where it came from. You don't have to worry about any of the guys around here using chemicals or other things to raise their crops that you can't produce. Like Hidden Valley Farm or Green Door Gourmet is an organic farm. Guardian Herb Farms, they use organic methods. There is no pesticides on their berries. So that's very important. You know, fruit not coming frozen from Chile. There's a peace of mind. And then also I believe Tennessee grows fantastic local produce. And when it's in season, you can't beat it.
You know, people love it, so.
It's been a labor of love. It's a lot of hard work that's gone into it. But if you had told me, 7 or 8 years ago that it would have evolved into this, I would have never believed you. It's been fantastic. It's been great to see the success. It's been a lot of fun. Me and my wife had a lot of fun. We've opened a restaurant out of it. So it's been a pretty neat ride.
We hope you've enjoyed getting in the kitchen with us, and maybe you are inspired to try your hand at canning something of your own. I'm Vicki Lawson. See you on the next Tennessee Life.
Tennessee Life is sponsored by
Mid-South Sewing and Fabric has what you need for your creative adventure. If it's sewing, embroidery, or vinyl projects you need for a home business, Etsy, Pinterest, and your family, we have it. Mid-South Sewing sells Brothers Sewing and Embroidery machines and the latest scan and cut crafting machine. Mid-South Sewing and Fabric in the Gallery Shopping Center.
Tennessee Life is also brought to you by The Flower Pot. For over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations, KnoxvilleFlowerPot.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you. A DVD of this program is available by visiting easttennesseepbs.org.